that in mind. Of course, yes, this is hard. See what comes with the investigation. But at the same time, most of science is good. Amongst the things that can be considered academic misconduct, and one of the most grave ones historically, is the idea of plagiarism. Um, there's been a lot of talk about it recently, with the resignation of Claudine Gay, amongst other things, and all the more with it being easy to find things on the web. It is quite a challenge, particularly for academic writing. And so I figured, why not talk about that a little bit today and get to some other things going on related to that, and also related to Harvard University. Here, but first, from Harvard's own website here, on their guide to using sources. What constitutes plagiarism? In academic writing, it is considered plagiarism to draw any idea or any language from someone else without adequately crediting that source in your paper. It doesn't matter whether the source is a published author, another student, a website without clear authorship, a website that sells academic papers, or any other person. Taking credit for anyone else's work is stealing, and it is unacceptable in all academic situations, whether you do it intentionally or by accident. Likewise, if you get into this with copyrights involved also, it can be copyright infringement to just take something verbatim and repeat it without giving appropriate credit. So this is particularly true with images and videos and, anything with a copyright logo on it. And I'm sure Kieran will correct me if I'm wrong if he sees this. But anyway, we'll say that on that front. The ease with which you can find all kinds of information online means that you need to be extra vigilant about keeping track of where you're getting your information and ideas, about giving proper credit to the authors of the sources you use. If you cut and paste from an electronic document into your notes and forgot to clearly label the document in your notes, or if you draw information from a series of websites without taking careful notes, you may end up taking credit for ideas that aren't yours, whether you mean to or not. Indeed, you have to be immensely careful of that. So they give some examples of types of plagiarism here, which is just important to recognize. So you do have the thing of plagiarizing verbatim. So, like, word for word from another source, in other words, and those kinds of things. And they actually provide examples with these other kinds of things here. But mosaic plagiarism, copying bits and pieces without adequately paraphrasing or quoting directly, is what's called mosaic plagiarism. With this. And it's a little bit harder to tell, but you can kind of see with these kinds of things with the plagiarizing going on here, and just from Harvard's own examples of that. Inadequate paraphrase. When you paraphrase, your task is to distill the source's ideas into your own words. It's not enough to change a few words here and there and leave the rest. Instead, you must completely restate the ideas in the passage in your own words. If your own language is too close to the original, you are plagiarizing, even if you do provide a citation. So, uncited paraphrasing, when you're using your own language to describe someone else's idea, that idea still belongs to the author of the original material. Therefore, it is not enough to paraphrase the source material responsibly. You also need to cite the source, even if you change the wording significantly. Uncited quotations. When you put source material in quotation marks in your essay, you are telling the reader that you have drawn the material from somewhere else. But it's not enough to indicate that the material in quotation marks is not the product of your own thinking or experimentation. You must also credit the author of that material and provide a trail for your reader to follow back to the original document. And using material from another student's work. This is obviously part of the student guidebook at Harvard, for which many would get, shall we say, many students would get lots of discipline for doing kinds of plagiarism, which is good. Plagiarism, and that is the reason it is taken so seriously, is because it is stealing somebody else's ideas. stealing somebody else's ideas, their hard work, is absolutely one of the most horrific things you can do in a scholarly sense with respect to academic misconduct, allegations, and the like. And so that's a lot of the reasons for the commentary that you've seen, is that it is horrendous. Even if, you didn't intend it, you gotta go to the nth degree and be careful with it. A lot of times. And that's where we come to this. This was very recently come up here just earlier this week. Dana-Farber seeks to retract 6 papers and correct 31 others. After questions raised by a science blogger, the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute has approached medical journals requesting they retract 6 research papers and correct 31 others. Now, what happened with that? The research listed numerous authors, including Harvard-affiliated Medical Center's chief executive Laura Glimcher, its chief operating officer William Hahn, other researchers including Irene Gobriel, director of the Institute's Clinical Investigator Research Program, and Kenneth Anderson, a program director, among others. The papers allegedly contained manipulated images, including charts that appeared to have elements that were duplicated, which would be plagiarism. Even with images, it's plagiarism if you're duplicating someone else's image. Or spliced together, giving a misleading impression of the results. Some of the papers cited in the blog post were published in influential journals, including Nature and Cell, over the past several decades. Concerns about the research first garnered public attention when a British blogger, Sholto David, published an account alleging numerous discrepancies in a January 2nd post on the website for Better Science. The allegations were then reported in the Harvard Crimson by the Harvard Crimson, Harvard's student newspaper. David, who has a biology background, told the New York Times that he often checks scientific research looking for errors, including using AI and posting on the website PubPeer. Quote, "We have only seen the tiny tip of the fraud iceberg. Image data duplications, the last resort of a failed scientist after every other trick failed to provide the desired result." This is one of the reasons plagiarism is so bad. And yes, I count not just in terms of the written kind of things, but if you are using somebody else's image in a peer-reviewed paper and not publicly citing them, you can use, don't get me wrong, in academic literature, you can use somebody else's images. But much like written plagiarism of just words, you must adequately cite the image. You must adequately point a way back to it. You must adequately give credit. If you do not, it absolutely is a plagiarism of an image. It's stealing somebody's imagery and work and the time and effort they put into it. Stealing somebody's ideas is really bad with this particular thing in scholarly writing. So, hence the reason we point to this. You got to give adequate credit for images. Stat reported last week that the Cancer Center had been investigating some of the problems David flagged for more than a year. Officials from Dana-Farber said they're committed to ensuring the integrity of the institution's research and confirmed they were already reviewing at least some of the potential data errors. Quote, "The presence of image discrepancies in a paper is not evidence of an author's intent to deceive," Barrett Rowlands, the Institute's research integrity officer, wrote in a statement. "That conclusion can only be drawn after careful fact-based examination, which is an integral part of our response. Our experience is that errors are often unintentional and do not rise to the level of misconduct." Now, I'm actually going to agree with this guy. There are times when you end up doing it and you're just not being careful tracking things. It still counts as plagiarism, but you didn't intend to do it. You made an honest mistake. And I'm usually very forgiving with honest mistakes myself. It happens. That's why we go back and make corrections to papers. It very much happens. And that's where it can be retraction. But 6 papers and 31 others. When a pattern of behavior gets repeated like that, I do start to wonder if there's a big problem there. Where somebody is just, obviously I have no evidence. The investigation's ongoing. That's the other thing. But I find it very hard to believe that when it's that many papers, 37 in total, where you have to do either a retraction or a correction to it, something just doesn't seem kosher to me with that. That is the kind of thing where I get really, really worried about corruption, or I really, as an activist, I really like an activist scientist who really wants their particular conclusion in a paper, not something else where you might find it from an image somewhere or create an image or something like that, um, with the like and these kinds of things. So it's concerning, for sure. It is absolutely concerning when something like this is going on. So, and to that degree, when it's that many papers in particular, it's very concerning. So that's the point I want to make with that, is that I can be very forgiving. And I think this might be true of a lot of academics. I can be very forgiving if it's a case where it happens like once or twice kind of thing. That's the deal. That suggests to me that's not a pattern of repeat behavior. Let's put it that way. When it's a repeat behavioral thing, that suggests to me a problem with whomever was writing the paper at that point, and a bit an issue of behavior and character with that person. That they would do something like that, manipulated images and data, or just straight out copying somebody else's in here. So, and this is the thing. I picked this article particularly because there are a couple of articles on this that have come up recently, both in Science and in others. And I picked this recently to make a point because I have seen a lot of stuff online lately of folks just denigrating everything going on in science because of headlines like this. And it is important to note that this is bad. And yes, I'm glad Dana-Farber is now reacting to it. This is horrifically bad that this kind of thing is happening. This many is really concerning, particularly when you're talking about a cancer center, studying cancer, trying to find cure for cancer, things like that. That is a concern, very big concern. But one institute doing something like that, or even several institutes doing like that, is not enough to validate decades and decades and decades of published research. It is not enough to invalidate all of that. And it should not be taken as so. And to get to that point, for at least some experts, the allegations did not prompt broader questions about the vetting systems used by scientific journals. Quote, I think there's a really important message here, which is that 98-99% of things that are published in good faith, said Eric Rubin, the editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine. When we hear about edge cases where things went really wrong, it can be very alarming. But there is a scientific method, there are standards of proof, and it usually almost always works. However, Rubin said he did not have enough information about the papers in question to assess the specific situation. And I will say that too. That's why I was saying 37 papers seems a bit bizarre. Very much a bizarre situation. And it suggests a pattern of behavior that's bad. But I want to know more. I want to wait for the investigation to bear itself out. So, with that, understandably so, with that. And here, the final thing here is about Claudine Gay and others who have been dealing with plagiarism in their own particular things. But that is a point that I wanted to make with this, is that plagiarism, manipulation of data like that, are all examples of academic misconduct, and they are incredibly serious. Because you are stealing ideas or fabricating things that are not true. And when you're talking about the reality-based disciplines, scientific disciplines, which are supposed to be reality-based, barring, postmodernist crap, infiltrating sciences and medicine and all the rest, that is a huge issue when you're stealing somebody's ideas or you're just flat-out fabricating stuff. And so, of course, the question is what to do about it to try and improve the system a little bit, because obviously this is a case where the system failed. Kind of thing. The system of peer review failed. And so I have been partial to something like this, where you do make use, where folks do actually go check things and go back and check things like this. So I don't necessarily have a problem with a blogger like this doing that. I actually think that's helpful to maintaining the integrity of the rest of the 98-99% of stuff that is good published work. There's a lot of crap out there, don't get me wrong, because we have so many different publications, so many different journals nowadays. That is one of the other things. But I do think most of it is good. Most of it is good, decent stuff. But this kind of crap is a problem, in that it also creates an image about everything else that isn't necessarily true. So bear that in mind. Of course, yes, this is hard. See what comes with the investigation. But at the same time, most of science is good. And I would also add one other thing with this. Most of the scientific research is good, let's put it that way. And for the record, I don't count anything with grievance studies under that under that particular label. Just for the record, and particularly after the grievance studies affair, I'm very hesitant to do that. Anyway, here's and that finally is the thing here. Most of scientific work is very good. Stuff like this, horrible. Doesn't necessarily mean anything about anything else. And at the same time, what are the things that we might do to improve upon and check for more situations like this and make corrections where they are needed? And again, some things may be innocent, some things suggest a pattern of behavior. This suggests a pattern of behavior to me that is not good. And then, what do we do to improve things and catch this kind of stuff before it gets to being a publication? And that may be where, because David here has actually talked about using AI to do this, and actually I think that might be a very savvy use for AI, is actually to check for things like copyright infringement and plagiarism. I think that actually might be very useful, unlike the other thing, which is like the Midjourney lawsuit right now, which is basically saying they take copyright imagery, but they don't pay for the imagery that they're taking when they train the model with that train the AI model Midjourney. But anyway, that's a whole other story. You can go over to the Crowdsource podcast to get more on that. But that's what I wanted to have a commentary on with this, and just remind folks that just because stuff like this happens, don't discount all the rest of scientific research just because it does. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button on the way out the door. Comment on the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, all that lovely good jazz. Until next time, I'm Adrian. May you stay curious, everybody.